Chosen one. Stop right here and don't let your attention scatter into anything else for a moment, because what you are about to read is not ordinary words stitched together for motivation. This is a message crafted for the part of you that has been quietly awake while everything else around you tried to keep you asleep. And if something in your chest already feels a little heavier or a little calmer or a little more focused, don't ignore that, because it is often in the quiet shift of awareness that real turning points begin. You have been moving through days that look normal on the outside but feel different on the inside, and even if you cannot explain it fully, you know something in you is not where it used to be. Your thoughts are not the same, your patience is not the same, your reactions are not the same, and your silence is not the same either. There is a depth forming in you that does not match the noise around you anymore. And that can feel confusing when everything external keeps pretending nothing is changing. But chosen one, not everything that is happening to you is visible, and not everything that is ending is loud. There are seasons where life does not announce transformation with celebration. It begins with discomfort, it begins with disconnection, it begins with moments where things that once felt easy start to feel unfamiliar, and people who once felt close start to feel distant without any clear reason. And you start questioning yourself, wondering if something is wrong with you, wondering if you are overthinking, wondering if you are becoming too sensitive or too different. But what if the truth is simpler and deeper at the same time? What if you are not breaking down, but breaking through something that has held you in place longer than you realized? Because growth does not always feel like progress at first. Sometimes it feels like loss. Sometimes it feels like confusion. Sometimes it feels like emptiness where familiarity used to be. And the mind tries to label it as failure, but something deeper inside keeps saying this is not the end. This is transition. You have been carrying more than what people can see, more than what you even admit to yourself, responsibilities that do not rest, thoughts that do not stop, expectations that never seem to lower, and emotions you have learned to silence just so you can function, and over time that creates a kind of exhaustion that sleep cannot fix, because it is not just your body that is tired, it is your inner world asking for space it never received. And still you keep going. You wake up, you respond, you adjust, you survive, you show up, even when something inside you is asking for stillness, even when your spirit feels like it is running without direction, even when your mind is full but your clarity feels distant. And this is where many people misunderstand themselves, because they think exhaustion always means weakness. But sometimes exhaustion is the result of endurance, of holding too much for too long without release, of being strong in ways that were never meant to be permanent. You were never meant to carry everything forever. There is a version of strength that looks like silence, and there is a version of strength that looks like stepping back, and there is a version of strength that looks like refusing to keep explaining yourself to things that drain you. But the world rarely teaches that kind of strength, so you learn to push instead of pause, to endure instead of release, to continue instead of recalibrate. And now your inner world is responding. That feeling of being slightly disconnected from what used to satisfy you, that subtle resistance toward things that once entertained you, that quiet questioning of where you belong or who you are becoming. That is not confusion for the sake of confusion. It is your awareness expanding beyond old definitions of yourself, because people do not stay the same when they are evolving. Even if everything around them tries to treat them as if they should, there comes a point where your old environment no longer matches your internal state, and instead of understanding that as failure, it is more accurate to understand it as mismatch, a misalignment between who you were and who you are becoming, and misalignment always creates discomfort until something shifts. And chosen one, something is shifting. You may not see it fully yet, but you feel it in fragments, in moments where silence feels heavier than noise, in moments where solitude feels more honest than company, in moments where your intuition speaks before logic catches up, in moments where your tolerance for certain energies drops without warning, and you are left wondering why. But your awareness is sharpening. You are noticing things you used to overlook, feeling things you used to dismiss, sensing patterns you used to ignore, and this increased sensitivity is not instability, it is perception refining itself. It is awareness becoming more precise. It is your inner alignment refusing to settle for what no longer resonates. And yes, that can feel isolating for a moment, because growth often walks you through spaces where familiarity falls away before clarity fully arrives. But what is important is this: you are not lost. You are in between. There is a stage in every transformation where the old version of you is no longer leading, but the new version is not fully introduced yet. And in that in-between space, everything feels uncertain, because identity is being rewritten in real time. And in that space, the mind tries to rush answers, tries to force clarity, tries to pull you back into what feels known, even if what is known is no longer aligned. But something in you resists going backwards now, even if it feels uncomfortable, even if it feels unfamiliar, even if it feels like standing in a quiet space where nothing is fully defined yet. There is a part of you that knows you cannot unsee what you have already seen. You cannot unfeel what you have already felt. You cannot return to a version of yourself that you have outgrown internally. And that realization is powerful, even if it is subtle, because not everyone recognizes when they are outgrowing a life before it collapses. But you are starting to sense it early, in layers, in intuition, in emotional signals that do not always make logical sense but still feel real. And this is where clarity begins forming slowly. You are being guided not by loud answers but by quiet understanding, not by external validation but by internal alignment, not by immediate certainty but by gradual recognition of what feels right and what does not. And the more you listen inwardly, the more obvious things become. Some connections no longer require explanation to understand they are fading. Some environments no longer require conflict to understand they are not aligned. Some habits no longer require discipline to release because your identity is already moving beyond them. And this is not loss, even though it can feel like it. This is refinement. Affinement, 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 affinement. Life is not taking things away from you randomly. It is reshaping what remains so that it matches where you are headed, not where you have been. And that process often feels like clearing, like shedding, like space being created where fullness used to exist. But space is not emptiness. Avegul soul, wista page 2d2 forik. That I savor and transition kamalusha. Alphos, space is potential. Alisharis, space is preparation. Space is the silence before something new has room to form. And chosen one, there is something important about silence that most people misunderstand. Silence is not absence, it is adjustment, it is recalibration. It is the moment where noise is removed so something deeper can be heard. And sometimes life reduces external noise so your internal voice becomes clearer. You may have noticed moments where you simply do not want overstimulation anymore, where your system prefers calm over chaos, depth over distraction, clarity over constant input. And that is not withdrawal. That is refinement of attention. Your focus is changing. What once captured your attention easily may no longer hold it, and what once felt insignificant may now feel meaningful. And that shift is not random. It is your awareness reorganizing itself around what actually matters to you now. And as that happens, priorities change naturally. You start valuing peace differently. You start noticing energy differently. You start respecting your own boundaries differently. And you start realizing that not everything deserves access to you. This realization alone changes everything. Because once you understand that your energy is not unlimited, you begin to protect it differently. And once you begin to protect it differently, your life starts restructuring itself around that protection. And restructuring is not always comfortable. It removes what does not match. It distances what does not align. It quiets what does not belong in your next stage. And while that can feel like endings, it is actually organization on a deeper level. You are not being punished by change. You are being prepared by it. There are versions of you that required certain environments to survive, but there are newer versions of you that require different conditions to thrive. And life is adjusting those conditions even if you are still learning how to understand it. And in that adjustment, you may feel moments of doubt, moments of questioning, moments where you wonder if you are doing something wrong by feeling different, but you are not. You are simply becoming someone who cannot fully function in what used to define you, and that is not a collapse. That is evolution. You are moving into a phase where clarity will replace confusion, But clarity does not always arrive all at once. It arrives in layers, in timing, in moments of recognition where things suddenly make sense that did not make sense before. And when those moments come, you will realize that what felt like delay was actually preparation, what felt like silence was actually alignment, and what felt like confusion was actually transition, because life rarely shows you the full picture while you are in the middle of it. It reveals meaning after movement has already begun. So if you are in a space where you are not fully who you were, but not yet who you are becoming, understand that this space is not accidental. It is necessary. You are being reshaped in ways you cannot fully measure yet. Cannot fully measure yet. And even though you may feel tired at times, even though you may feel uncertain at times, even though you may feel like you are standing between two versions of your life, there is something steady underneath it all that has not left you. Your awareness is still here. Your sensitivity is still guiding you. Your ability to recognize truth is still active, and your capacity to grow is still intact. Insure annitito, and that means nothing is lost in you, only reorganized. So, chosen one, do not rush yourself out of this phase. Do not force clarity that has not finished forming. Do not confuse transition with failure, and do not mistake quiet seasons for absence of direction, because even when nothing feels fully defined, something is still unfolding, and what is unfolding is not random. It is aligned with who you are becoming in ways you will understand more clearly with time. For now, keep noticing what feels honest. Keep paying attention to what feels heavy versus what feels light. Keep respecting what your inner awareness is showing you without forcing it to match old expectations, because you are not going backwards. You are not stuck. You are not forgotten in your process. You are in motion, even when it does not look like movement. And what is ahead of you will make more sense than what is behind you. Not because everything will become easy, but because everything will become clearer, and clarity, when it arrives, will feel like remembering something you already knew deep inside all along. You are going through a phase of inner transition, not failure, even if it feels uncertain or uncomfortable right now. What you are experiencing is not a sign that something is wrong with you or your life, but rather a reflection of deep internal change that is gradually reshaping how you think, feel, and perceive the world around you. During such periods, it is common to feel emotionally unsettled, mentally scattered, or disconnected from things and people that once felt familiar or meaningful. This does not mean you are losing yourself. It means you are moving beyond an older version of yourself that no longer fits who you are becoming. Confusion often appears in this stage because your internal identity is updating faster than your external reality. Your thoughts may feel different, your interests may shift, and your emotional responses may no longer match your past patterns. This mismatch creates a temporary sense of instability, but it is not destruction, it is adjustment. Just like a system updating in the background, there is a process happening within you that is reorganizing your priorities, values, and awareness. Emotional shifts are also part of this transition. You may find yourself feeling more sensitive, more reflective, or even more withdrawn than usual. This is not weakness, it is heightened awareness. You are beginning to notice things you previously ignored, recognize patterns you once overlooked, and question things you previously accepted without thought. This increased perception can feel overwhelming at first, but it is actually a sign of growth and maturity in your inner world. Disconnection from certain environments or relationships is another natural outcome of this process. As you change internally, not everything around you will continue to align with your new perspective. Some spaces may feel draining, some conversations may feel shallow, and some connections may lose their previous meaning. This is not a loss of belonging, but a redirection toward spaces that better match your evolving self. Ultimately, this phase is about becoming, not breaking. It is the space between who you were and who you are meant to be. Even though it may feel uncertain, it is moving you toward greater clarity, self-awareness, and alignment with your deeper direction in life. Exhaustion does not always come from physical effort alone. In many cases, the deepest form of tiredness comes from carrying too much for too long without enough space to release it. When a person continues to manage responsibilities, emotions, expectations, and internal pressure over an extended period, the weight begins to accumulate silently. At first it may not feel overwhelming, because the mind is capable of adapting and pushing through, but over time, what was once manageable starts to feel heavy, not because it suddenly increased, but because it was never truly set down. Emotional pressure is one of the biggest contributors to this kind of exhaustion. Holding in feelings, staying strong for others, or constantly managing inner struggles without expressing or processing them creates an invisible burden. This burden does not rest, even when the body is still. It continues to occupy mental and emotional space, slowly draining energy in ways that are not immediately noticeable. A person may appear functional on the outside while internally feeling worn down and overstretched. Mental pressure adds another layer. Constant thinking, overanalyzing situations, worrying about outcomes, and trying to make the right decisions without clarity can exhaust the mind even more than physical work. When thoughts do not quiet down, the brain remains in a state of ongoing activity, which prevents real recovery. Even sleep may not feel fully restorative because the mind has not truly disengaged. Life pressures, such as responsibilities, expectations from others, and the need to keep moving forward regardless of internal state, also contribute significantly. When someone feels they must always perform, always be available, or always maintain stability for others, they begin to ignore their own need for rest. Over time, this imbalance leads to depletion. This kind of exhaustion is not a sign of weakness. It is a signal that the load being carried has exceeded what can be sustained without pause or relief. It reflects the need for release, boundaries, rest, and emotional space. When these are not present, even the strongest person eventually feels drained. Outgrowing people, habits, and environments is a natural and often unavoidable part of personal growth. As a person evolves internally, their thoughts, values, priorities, and emotional awareness begin to shift in ways that are not always immediately visible on the outside. This inner transformation gradually creates a gap between who they were before and who they are becoming, and that gap often shows up in how they relate to their surroundings. When you start to grow beyond an older version of yourself, the things that once felt familiar may begin to feel different. Conversations that used to engage you might now feel repetitive or unfulfilling. Habits that once felt normal may start to feel unproductive or misaligned with your current mindset. Even environments that once felt comfortable may begin to feel limiting or energetically heavy. This shift does not happen because something is wrong with those people or places, but because your internal state is no longer the same as it was when you first connected with them. Feeling disconnected during this phase is common because growth often happens quietly within before it is fully understood externally. You are still physically present in the same spaces, but mentally and emotionally you are beginning to move towards something different. This creates a sense of distance that can feel confusing at first. You may question why you no longer feel the same sense of belonging or why certain interactions feel draining instead of fulfilling. However, this is not a sign of isolation in a negative sense, but a reflection of evolution in progress. As your awareness expands, you begin to recognize what aligns with your current self and what no longer supports your direction. This increased clarity naturally leads to separation from things that do not match your growth anymore. Some connections may fade, not because of conflict, but because they no longer resonate. Some habits fall away because they no longer fit the person you are becoming. This process is not about loss, but alignment. It is about moving from environments that once shaped you into environments that now reflect you. Outgrowing is not rejection of the past, it is confirmation that you have expanded beyond it. Clarity does not usually arrive all at once. It develops gradually through awareness and alignment. In moments of uncertainty, it is normal to feel like nothing makes sense or that you are unable to see the full picture of what is happening in your life. However, this lack of immediate understanding is often part of a deeper process where insight is being built slowly through experience, reflection, and inner observation rather than instant answers. As you move through different situations, your awareness naturally begins to sharpen. You start noticing patterns in your thoughts, behaviors, and emotional responses that you may have previously overlooked. You become more sensitive to what feels right and what feels draining, even if you cannot fully explain why. This growing awareness acts as a quiet guide, helping you differentiate between choices, people, and environments that support your well-being and those that do not. Alignment plays an important role in this process. When your actions, decisions, and surroundings begin to match your inner state more closely, confusion starts to reduce on its own. You may not always realize it immediately, but every time you choose what feels authentic instead of what feels forced, you are moving closer to clarity. Over time, these small choices accumulate and create a more stable sense of direction in your life. Following your intuition becomes especially important during uncertain phases. Intuition often works quietly, through subtle feelings, instincts, or inner signals that guide you without requiring full logical explanation. When you learn to trust these signals instead of ignoring them, you begin to navigate life with greater ease and understanding, even in situations that are still unfolding. Protecting your energy is also a key part of gaining clarity. When you constantly expose yourself to situations, people, or environments that drain you, it becomes harder to think clearly or feel balanced. By setting boundaries and creating space for rest and reflection, you allow your mind and emotions to settle, which naturally brings more insight over time. Ultimately, clarity is not something forced, it is something revealed. As you continue to stay aware, aligned, and open to change, understanding gradually unfolds on its own, turning confusion into direction step by step.